Welcome to Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman. Ready for a big show. It's our NBA Finals preview. We'll take a quick peek back at the Heat-Celtics series at first, which was crazy. Then we'll get into the finals. I mean, who's got the better stars? Who's got the better role players? The coaching, the intangibles. Just based off our text, I'm not going to give it away yet, but we're kind of on the same page, which makes me a little nervous, but we'll see what happens. I mean,
Don't be.
should be an awesome final series. I mean, this Celtics Heat was crazy the whole way. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. So many twists and turns. You never know. I mean, both of these teams, one play, one injury away. Anything can happen in the NBA Finals, but it's going to be a great matchup. I think that the two best players in the playoffs, this year have been Jokic and Butler. So good to see them matching up. Denver looking for their first NBA championship ever. Meanwhile, Miami looking for a bunch in the last 10 years. They've been very successful. One with Wade and Shaq, won a couple with LeBron and Wade. I believe looking for their fourth championship, but all within the last 15 years or so. We'll have betting locks of the week, which was a good week for the show. Sports trivia. We'll briefly touch on the Stanley Cup Finals as well, statements of the week, and plenty more. Tom, I cannot wait to get started. This is always one of the big shows. I mean, we got the Super Bowl preview, the Finals preview, the MLB World Series preview. These are the type of things that we as sports fans live for.
Absolutely. And it's going to be really exciting to talk about all of that stuff. But before we get to Nuggets and Heat, of course, we went over Nuggets and Lakers, a series that went 4 games. We should definitely talk about a series that looked like it could be going 4 games with the Heat and the Celtics. Ended up going all the way to 7, only the fourth time in NBA history that a team down 3-0 has forced a game 7. But the statistics remain defeated. I believe it is 0 out of 151 teams have dug themselves into a 3-0 hole and have come back ultimately short. And I say dug themselves into a hole very purposefully, very intentionally here, because it feels like this is something that the Celtics have been doing, fighting these uphill battles all throughout the season, where you have, they lose their head coach at the very beginning of the year, or a couple of weeks, right before the season, essentially right as the league year is about to start. They had a couple different assistant coaches that had left over the summer. I think Damon Stoudemire went to accept a college gig. Essentially, Celtics found themselves in this spot where they were short a few coaches, and against a guy who I think is probably, as of right now, the best coach in the NBA.
Agreed. 100% agree.
Celtics came up short in Game 7, and I think I wasn't shocked that they lost Game 7. I was shocked at how poorly they played. Jason Tatum gets a little bit, not a pass necessarily, but when you turn your ankle,
he got hurt
at the first part of the game, to gut it through like that. It was
the first possession.
But everybody else on the Celtics has a lot of answering to do for their performance.
Jaylen Brown,
to say the least. I mean, 8 turnovers on 8 made 8 shots in the game and turned the ball over 8 times. So I guess the question is, where does this series rank in terms of craziness as far as this all goes? Because I could probably say this is maybe not the most entertaining from an aesthetic standpoint. It's not a back and forth series, those really fun kind of like NBA Finals matchups that we like to see. But in its own right, this was possibly the wackiest series I've ever encountered.
Yeah, I think it's the wackiest all time. I mean, I don't have it written down as the best series ever because we've had so many iconic superstars matching up. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jimmy Butler, really, really good players, but they're not on the pantheon of all-time greats, so to speak. I mean, I think they're both probably future Hall of Famers, but again, I wouldn't say neither are like a top 10, top 20 player all time. Obviously, there was some games this series where the scoring wasn't on high. It wasn't the greatest display. I mean, I thought that one of the best series ever was that Cavaliers comeback, 3-1 down against the Warriors. I have those two written down as the craziest series because that was a 73-9 Warrior team. I know they struggled against the Thunder, but the fact that they blew a 3-1 lead was kind of shocking. That in itself was wacky. This series not necessarily as good as that one, but this was crazier. I mean, it just had so many twists and turns going in. Boston's the heavy favorite, which I didn't agree with. Just to be clear, I picked Boston in 7 personally, and I was torn. I was like 51% Boston, 49% Miami. Going into game 7, Tom, I actually thought the Heat would win. I was, again, 51, 52%. I did bet on the Heat plus 8.5, had a lot of money on that game. Heat 5-2 against the spread in that playoff series. I bet on them every single game to cover Miami. So I wasn't necessarily shocked that Miami won game 7. I wasn't shocked that they won this series. But the way it was looking, it felt like they were going to win it in 4 games. I mean, when they got up 2-0, I thought it might be a 4-game series. And then all of a sudden, Boston comes back, makes it 3-2. And then game 6 was crazy because Boston was up, 9-10 points with 3-4 minutes left. It feels like Boston's got game 7 on their home floor, and then Miami comes back. They take a lead on that Jimmy Butler, 3 free throws there. They're up 1. I thought the game was over. Actually, I was at the wedding this weekend, dancing the night away. I didn't even hardly watch any of the game. I put it on with a few minutes left. I was actually catching that buzzer beater at the wedding. My first thought was, it's over. Miami just won. And then you look at the replay, they got it off just in the nick of time, 0.1, 0.2 tenths of a second. Boston survives, and everyone thinks Boston will win game 7. Not me necessarily personally, but just the flow of the series just sort of felt that way for a lot of folks. And then for them to actually blow game 7, I do think Jason Tatum was genuinely hurt. I do think that was real, but I don't think that he would have made a 20-point difference. I mean, I think that there was a lot of missed shots. Kind of reminded me a lot of that Rockets Warrior game 7 a few years back when it was James Harden on the Rockets, KD and Curry. Houston was a 3-point shooting team the whole season. It's what they did. Boston's a 3-point shooting team the whole season. It's what they do. But at some point, you got to adjust. I mean, other crazy series I have written down, again, probably all of these series, aesthetically, as you mentioned, probably better overall series. But I wouldn't say wackier than this one. Because this is crazy because we've never seen the 3-0 coming back from 3-0. But this was also a 2 seed against an 8 seed, albeit Miami's not a true 8 seed. They had injuries. But this was kind of weird the way this series went. But I do have written down the LeBron Pistons series, 07. Cavs past the Pistons. Actually, it's the anniversary of that performance. 48 points for LeBron. Scored like the last 20 or something like that for Cleveland. That was crazy because that was a one-man show taking down the Pistons. I have written down Big Shot Bob hitting that 3. That was kind of a wacky ending. It was a 2-1 Kings series. Shaq misses, Kobe misses, and then Vlade tips it out thinking the clock's going to run out. Sacramento would be up 3-1. Lands in Robert Horry's hands, hits the game-winning 3 to win by 1. That was kind of wacky that, Kobe lobbed to Shaq against the Blazers. Crazy fourth quarter comeback for the Lakers. Again, this is games I remember growing up. I did go through and watch all the Bulls playoff games on YouTube. That Chicago-Indiana series, 1998 Eastern Conference Finals, was an iconic 7-game series. That was definitely thrilling. But this was kind of, in many ways, the most surprising. Really, it's this and the Cavs comeback against Golden State, because I did not see Cleveland coming back down 3-1. I mean, that was an incredible Warrior team, but it does speak to the whole live by the 3, die by the 3. You're capable of going hot and cold. That's exactly what happened with Boston. But what made this series the wackiest, Tom, kind of like what puts it over the top, is all these undrafted players for Miami. These guys that probably 3-4 years ago, for the casual NBA fan, maybe even this year, they've never heard of these guys. Who are these guys? I mean, Caleb Martin, I think I saw the voting breakdown, and it was something like 4-3, 5-4 for Jimmy Butler to get the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And a lot of folks thought that Caleb Martin deserved it. I mean, just under 20 points per game, 60% shooting from the floor, almost 50% on threes. He was incredible. You look at Gabe Vincent, also undrafted, shooting a high percentage, scoring about 15 a game. Duncan Robinson, he was nowhere to be seen the first couple series for Miami. He got buried deep to the bench. All of a sudden, Duncan Robinson gets in. He scores double-figure points in this series. I mean, just these sort of like, I hate to use the word nobodies because they're professional basketball players, but relative to the basketball sphere, I mean, there's a stat that it's like 7 undrafted players, I believe, played for Miami, and they're like the most since whatever era. It's been like more than 40, 50 years last time we saw a team with that many undrafted players make the NBA Finals. That one was wacky because, we kept talking about regression to the mean. When are these Heat players going to cool off? And they really didn't. Actually, ironically, Jimmy Butler was the one that cooled off late in that series, but the role players kept on keeping on. So if you told me that Caleb Martin would be the best or the second best player on the Miami Heat team that made the finals, he was the second or third best player in the series. I mean, look at Butler, Tatum, and Martin. They were all roughly equally good in this series. So you can actually argue he was the best player in the entire series, which is just wacky in itself, Caleb Martin. So that kind of put it over the edge. All these Heat guys sort of coming out of nowhere to dominate the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, and that's a testament to the Miami Heat and, the Heat culture that they have, which is something we'll be touching on a little bit later on in the program as well. Their ability to find talent, because the whole thing, I know, like, I was listening to an interview from that their radio play-by-play color analyst was doing, and she said that they kind of bristle in Miami at the term undrafted because it kind of connotes that these players don't belong, that these players are kind of lucky in getting here. Whereas you look at guys like Caleb Martin. Last time I heard of Caleb Martin was when he was playing for the Nevada Wolfpack in the NCAA tournament, and he grinded for multiple years, in these kind of like semi-pro, alternate leagues that are a tick below the NBA. And this is really a testament to the G League and what the G League can become for the NBA, because it used to be, there's always been minor league basketball, but it's always been unaffiliated or loosely affiliated. Now you have teams like, say, for the Chicago Bulls, you have the Chicago Bulls, and just down the street, you have the Windy City Bulls as well. And Miami and Toronto is another team, another franchise that has been really, really good at cycling guys through and saying, hey, if you're a two-way player, we're going to have you play in Miami one night, then we're going to send you to Sioux Falls tomorrow so you get more minutes there. And then you're coming back to Miami and really working these guys and churning the roster and finding guys that fit what they want to do. And what they want to do is they want to play defense. They want to put forth that effort, because we've seen throughout the postseason, heck, throughout the regular season, the Miami Heat kind of run hot and cold. I think they're 27th in the league in three-point shooting or something along those lines. Typically, that is not a recipe for success.
43.4% this series.
Yeah, like they shot the ball phenomenally, but what they're able to do is they're able to withstand those droughts because they are so disciplined on defense and on doing the little things to win. And they have a superstar that sells out to that sort of thing in Jimmy Butler. And I think he's elevated himself from star to superstar over the past couple of seasons, which is a testament to his work ethic and his ability as a late first round pick when Chicago drafted him, I think 30th overall, a number of years back.
Thanks Chicago.
And then traded him away. Different conversation if we want to relitigate that sort of a conversation.
Sure. But we're going litigation, Tom.
but essentially, this is a team that is kind of perfectly constructed to be what it is, and happened to catch enough breaks along the way. I don't know if the Miami Heat beat the Milwaukee Bucks, quite honestly, if you have a fully healthy Giannis in Game 1, in Game 2. I don't know if the Heat make it out of the first round in that case, but they had the opportunity. They're disciplined and they take it. I mean, what's the saying that half of Luck is opportunity and being ready
We
for
make
your
our
opponent.
own luck.
That's the sort of thing that the Heat have been doing. They go up against a New York Knicks team that is solid, but doesn't have the talent to outgun the Heat necessarily. And then what we see against Boston? Yeah, on paper, Boston is the more talented team. You have Tatum, you have Brown, who are top lottery first round draft picks in back to back years. You have a number of talented reserves: Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams III, Al Horford, a solid vet. You have a lot of really, really good talent compared to, like you said, the no names on the Heat. But the Heat stuck with it and they were consistent all the way. And like I said, I'm not surprised that the Heat won game 7, because I figured when you lose game 6 on a little tip in rebound like that, Spoelstra, Butler, everybody down the pecking order
He's
in
like,
that
let's play
organization
now.
is get every single loose ball you can. Well, like, look what happened when we led up for half of a second. That was enough. And that could be the difference in this series. That could be the difference in the final. I think, like, hats off to the Heat for what they have done as an 8 seed via the play-in tournament. Like, they were the 7 seed if you go based on record for the regular season, but still a bottom half of the playoff bracket. But one thing to point out, I think they have the best overall record last season. So certainly this is not unfamiliar territory for the Heat. And they have a little bit of a rivalry going with Boston. I think they've met in 3 of the past 4 playoffs. So
It's
Heat
2-1
getting the better
Miami
of Boston
now.
again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and real quick, Tom, Miami rather, just an incredible performance for them in these finals. Caleb Martin, the most points in a conference finals, been an undrafted player in NBA history. That was definitely iconic, and I was going to say something, and I'm blanking on what it was right now, but definitely very impressive for Miami. An excellent performance for them.
Yeah. So that kind of segues right into, is this series, just to kind of wrap up with a bow on it? Do you feel it was more about Miami winning it or Boston losing it?
You know, I know this is a kind of a cop-out answer. I mean, I'm going to lean one way, but it is
Uh huh.
obviously a combination of both. I
Both.
mean,
Yes.
I think this is. I know they say the NBA is a pretty simple league, a make or miss league, but this series was simply down to that. You look at the regular season. What I was going to say, by the way, Miami had the 4th most injuries of any team in the regular season, and our Chicago Bulls were in a 1-possession game with the Heat with about 2 minutes left before they
Mm-hmm.
got Max Strus at the end of that game. So it's crazy how Miami almost wasn't even here. And they actually, Tom, I hate to say it again, but of any statement of the week you've ever made, the worst one by far of us doing the show together, which I vehemently disagreed with, was your thoughts on the play-in game. They're making you eat your words. Miami
Not
in the
really.
play-in game. Yeah, they were in the play-in tournament. They're in the
If
finals. And the Lakers
if
were in the
if
Western
if there
Conference
weren't
finals.
But if there weren't a play-in tournament, both the Lakers and the Heat were in the playoffs anyway. The way it would make me eat my words is if, say, Chicago or Toronto was making a run like this. But if we take out that format, these
I don't
guys,
know, Tom.
nothing changed for the Lakers. They played 2 games. They ended in the exact same spot they would have been if there were no play-in tournament.
I
The
like the
only way
play-in
where it
magic.
kind of sort of helps the Heat is that it bumped them down to the 8th spot. But again, that's more on
They
the
would have
Giannis
played
injury
Boston
than
in
it
the
is the
first
play-in
round.
tournament.
They would have played Boston
Yeah.
in the first round. So I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
essentially we just end up in the same place more or less, which is what
Yeah,
I was
but it
saying
could
with
have
the
been
play-in
very
tournament kind of
different.
just being
I don't know. The playing teams making it that far has to be worth something. But as far as back to the series, was it, Boston blowing at Miami, doing great? Combo of both. The biggest difference was easily at the 3-point line. Boston was the better
Mhm.
3-point shooting team all year long. They shot about 30% from 3 this series, which is in the modern NBA horrendous. I mean, look at some of these teams. If you're not shooting minimum 35, 36% as a team from 3, you're simply not winning games. I mean, that
Mhm.
literally, in Boston's a team that shot 40% much of the season on 3-pointers, like close to that at least. Meanwhile, Miami shot 43.4 from 3, Boston 30%. Just massive difference. That's where the series was won, at the 3-point line. I think that Miami gets a lot of credit for getting better looks, gets a lot of credit for playing tough defense. Definitely don't want to take anything away from Miami. I think, their role players help win this series. Caleb Martin, as I mentioned in the last segment, most points by an undrafted player in conference finals history. I mean, this guy was about 19 points per game, 60% from the field, almost 50% from three, got more than 6 rebounds a game. You look at some of these other role players, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, double figure points, shooting a high percentage from the floor. I mean, Miami's role players definitely helped them win this series. So that's why I'm kind of like 45, 55. I'll say Miami definitely gets a lot of credit, but I would say a little bit more it was Boston losing this series because their star players did not show up. I mean, you look at Jaylen, and Jaylen Brown was actually a bigger problem. I know Tatum wasn't great in the fourth quarter. He gets hurt in game 7, wasn't great in game 7. Overall, he was still fairly decent, not at the sort of MVP level he was during the regular season. He was definitely worse than you would expect, but you look at Jaylen Brown, abysmal series for Jaylen Brown. He shot, Tom, 16% from three-point land. He had more turnovers than assists this entire series, Jaylen Brown did. That is inexcusable. Jason Tatum, the first 3 games of this series, Tom, did not score a single point in the fourth quarter. I mean, yes, Boston's role players could have played a little bit better, although, Derek White did his part. He was, in many stretches, Boston's best player. It came down to Boston stars were not as good as normal, in particular Jaylen Brown. And then I think a lot of it was really coaching. I think coaching made a big difference. Eric Spoelstra clearly outcoached Joe Mazzulla. And I think you got to have a plan B. I get it. You've got your team strength. It's what you do best. It's what you want to do. Boston's a three-point shooting team. I get it. But if you miss 10-plus straight threes in the fourth quarter or in the first quarter and, in the game 7, you missed your 10, I think it was like 10, 11, 12 threes in a row
12.
they missed. 0 for 12 to start in game 7. I think it was, I watched the post-game show. I think it was Charles Barkley that said it, either Chuck or Shaq, where if you're the coach, you tell them next guy to shoot a 3, I'm going to beat you up. And they use different language because they can on that show. I'm not going to use that language. And they were completely right. At some point, you got to tell your guys, put your head down, drive to the basket, get a mid-range shot, get something closer that works. And I think that's something that, like the Warriors all those years, live by the 3, die by the 3. Very underrated part of the Warriors was Stephen Curry driving to the basket. The Warriors getting easy layups off their, people afraid of the three-point game. If you look at what Boston did last season on their finals run, what they did this season, they probably made more tough shots than just about any elite team in the NBA. They made a lot of threes. They made a lot of tough shots. Nothing ever seems easy for Boston. And Mazzulla could be to blame, but even last year, it's kind of how they played. I think this year they're just a little bit more or a little bit less set plays. They never had set plays. They just played the game of basketball. They got through on talent alone, but at some point you got to have a plan B. If the shot isn't falling, you got to, go to the bucket. That's on Jason Tatum, by the way, Tom. You know how much I love statistics, but it's just a feel for the game. And for me, I'm not ready to put Jason Tatum as a first-tier star. I really think that, like, when it's all going good, this guy is incredible. But just in those tight moments where you really need a play, you really need something, he's not a first-tier star for me. I could put him as a top 10 player, maybe like that 9-10 range. But a lot of folks want Jason Tatum to be an MVP candidate year in, year out. And he might get there 4th, 5th because Boston gets a really good record. But this guy, is not one of the 5 players I want in the NBA personally leading my team. I just don't see them having an option when the shot isn't falling. I look at the all-time greats, even Curry, again, Curry driving to the basket is the most underrated point in the history of basketball because this guy can score inside when he needs to. He's very good off the dribble. Obviously, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, even Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, these guys can post up and get a bucket when they need it. I don't see that in Jason Tatum. I don't see him affecting the game the same way some of these other guys do. Same for Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown actually is not necessarily a great defensive player. So really, Boston did not have a plan B. That's coaching, that's leadership, that's your superstar stepping up, and none of that happened. They didn't have the urgency, and you can play around against Atlanta and win. You can do that. You cannot play around against a team with the Heat culture, which you mentioned, a team that knows how to play defense, a team that's very smart, a team that's very clutch at the end of games. You cannot do that against a team like Miami. So definitely, I think Boston is a little bit more to blame, but got to give credit to Miami as well on a fantastic series.
Absolutely, I'm of the same mind. It's a little column A, a little column B on who's falling. I mean, Miami certainly earned it. Boston certainly gave it away as well with just a lack of execution, especially from three, especially getting some open threes and not putting them in the way they had all season. And they just were not able to make any adjustments from that point. But enough of looking in the rear view mirror. It is time for the NBA Finals. Thursday night is when we'll be getting the tip off on, and one of the guys in the tip off, Nikola Jokic. I think certainly we can say pretty easily he is the best player in the series. But Jimmy Butler has been here before, and he says that playoff Jimmy doesn't exist. And hey, who am I to question Jimmy Butler on whether or not his alter ego does or does not exist? But who would you rather have for this NBA Finals? Would you go with Nikola Jokic, who is, a back-to-back MVP, runner-up this season, certainly playing near, if not at the peak of his powers, or the guy who has seemingly overcome just about every obstacle in his way to get to this point a second time?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case that these are two of the top 5 players in the modern NBA you would want in this exact scenario, especially now given, the fact that they're both kind of in their prime of their careers. I know Jokic is literally in his prime time. Like you said, peak of his powers. What's scary is he could get even better, but I think this is definitely Jokic for me. I do believe in the playoff Jimmy Butler. He was incredible in the finals in the bubble a few years ago. But I do think that he seemed a little bit tired. Like there's something to be said when you're the guy, when you're carrying the show. And Jimmy Butler does that on both ends. You look at this last series, he shot about 42% from the floor, which is much lower than he did the first few rounds. So I think you got to factor that in. Like, how tired is Jimmy Butler? How much more does he have left? Obviously Denver's been cruising in the playoffs. Jokic, look, the team runs through him. He's the most valuable, but he's kind of in like an interesting spot because I don't know, maybe you don't waste as much energy just sitting in the post and dishing the ball around. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it feels like they like maximize him for what he does. Like, he's not like a LeBron James where, he drives to the basket, whole defense collapses, he dishes it out. Jokic is more of that bully ball, and if they double team, he'll find the open guy. If they don't, he'll score, which is kind of unstoppable. I mean, what do you do against that? Like, you're not going to guard him one-on-one in the post, but you can't double because he's going to hit a wide open teammate. So kind of a tough spot. I mean, I think it comes down to ultimately Jokic just does a little bit more overall on offense. I know Jimmy's probably a better defensive player, but you look at what they're doing this postseason. Butler about 28.5 points, Jokic about 30. But Jokic gets 13.3 rebounds, 10.3 assists. Butler's about 7 rebounds and 6 assists, considerably lower on those numbers. I think Jokic does more to impact the game, and that's not a knock on Jimmy Butler because Jokic does more than just about any player in the NBA to impact the game. I mean, like you look at this is probably fair. You look at the last 20 years, it's probably LeBron and then Jokic, the most impactful players on the game. And LeBron basically said as much in his post-game conference. In after he lost game 4 against Jokic and the Nuggets. So I think Jokic can beat you in a variety of ways. He can beat you shooting. He can beat you passing. He can beat you posting up. He's definitely the better player. He's definitely the star I want. But It definitely feels weird and maybe not quite right counting out Jimmy Butler because that's never a good idea to do. I do think he's going to have a great series as well. I think both superstars will show up in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, they have no choice but to show up. I'm also going to go with Nikola Jokic on this one. I've been a big fan of him for a number of years now, and I thought he should have been the MVP. I understand why he's not,
Should have been.
but he's definitely going to be the focal point and the biggest star of the series because there is no matching up with Nikola Jokic. With Jimmy Butler, yes, he's much more talented than Aaron Gordon, but at least Aaron Gordon can be a suitable matchup as far as
Big
trying
body.
to limit, Jimmy Butler to match him in that physical intensity that Jimmy Butler brings to the floor every single night. Bam Adebayo is fantastic at what he does, but he is smaller than Nikola Jokic is. So that means if you're able to get Jokic in the post on Adebayo, advantage Jokic. And again, if you're able to pull Adebayo away from the rim, the Heat don't have a ton of size behind Bam, so they don't really have a lot of rim protection, which means Denver's going to be free to cut to the basket all night long if you have Jokic away from the basket. And we saw, after that game one in the Lakers series, how Rui Hachimura was on Jokic for a little bit, and that there's a significant difference in stats between when Anthony Davis was on Jokic and when Hachimura was on Jokic.
Sample
But then we saw
size.
Jokic figured
Lack
it
thereof.
out. He figured out, oh, okay, you gave me this look, and I know how to defeat that basically. So I think if any coaching staff, if any team is equipped to draw something up to kind of try to just compete with Jokic, not necessarily stop or even limit him, it would be Miami and this staff. But if I'm picking a star, I'm going to go with the guy that I don't really know how to defend, quite frankly, because he's going to have a lot easier of a time having success than I think Jimmy Butler will, just because the Nuggets can throw a lot more conventional stuff at Butler than Miami's going to be able to throw at Jokic.
Yeah, you can't defend Jokic. One name to think about, though, because he was used a lot more earlier in the playoffs, not as much this last series. Kevin Love. Do they get Kevin Love in there and pull Jokic away from the rebounding edge? Kevin Love, a three-point threat.
Maybe.
That's a name, maybe not so much on defense, but on offense. Do they go to Kevin Love? Maybe they put Kevin Love and Bam in and kind of have those more bodies around the basket. Just something to think about. Speaking of guys who do have finals experience, playoff experience, that may be a little wrinkle that Spo has at some point this series.
Yeah, so that's as far as the top A star, definitely we're both Jokic over Butler on that one. But as far as role players go, would you rather have Miami's, ragtag band of undrafted free agents that they have molded into a really solid bench and really solid rotation, or would you go with Denver, which actually kind of goes short on their rotation, only running 7, maybe 8 guys in a given game, but of course spearheaded by, I don't know if you call him a role player, but we'll say secondary star in Jamal Murray, kind of matching him up with Bam Adebayo as far as their level of importance, and then going from there. Do you go Miami role players or Denver role players?
Yeah, for the sake of this, I'm not counting Jamal Murray as a role player because he's not a role player.
And same thing for Bam, right?
Yeah, I'm not counting either.
Okay.
I think they're both legitimate, like second, like a 2.5 tier stars. I would say they're secondary stars. There's not much to be said about either of those guys being role players. Actually, Bam is more of a role player because he's not necessarily an amazing scorer. He's not bad by any means, but he does a lot more rebounding defense, so to speak. Jamal Murray is a little bit more of like a pure scorer. So I'm going more outside of those two. And really, this is kind of a difficult question to answer. Because again, if we look at the cumulative season as a whole, the cumulative careers as a whole, definitely got to go with Denver, right? I mean, Michael Porter Jr. is better than anyone Miami has as far as role players, unless we get a fully healthy Tyler Hero. Then at that point, we sort of have a debate. We look at some of these other guys too, Caldwell Pope. Speaking of playoff experience, NBA championship experience, he's got that as well with LeBron and Davis from a few years back. You look at Bruce Brown has been really good, as a role player for Denver. I think Denver's role players are a little bit more talented. I mean, You look at Aaron Gordon, proven veteran, NBA dunk champion. He's a pretty good player. Like, people forget how good Aaron Gordon is. I mean, I know in Orlando that wasn't a great team, but he was at certain points the best player on the Magic. And when you're asked to be the best player on a team, and all of a sudden you're asked to be what, the fourth option, it's different when you have Aaron Gordon as your fourth option. I would say that's a pretty good fourth option. Even Michael Porter Jr. I mean, you and I know as Mizzou guys, this guy was heralded as the next Kevin Durant before all the back injuries. He's lost a little bit of bounce, a little bit of athleticism, but he has not lost that jump shot. Michael Porter Jr. He can knock down threes at will. I mean, I'm kind of thinking of like Gordon and Porter Jr., and we got to go to like a really bad NBA team. I'm not saying that, that could be the lead guy on a playoff team, but these are guys who on a lesser NBA team are capable of maybe even being the number one option on a given team, for a certain stretch. And you're asking them to be the third or fourth option. That's pretty good. Now, as far as who's played better in the playoffs, I think Miami's role players have actually been better in the playoffs overall, because Caleb Martin's been the best role player in the entire playoffs. We just saw him set the record for most conference finals points by an undrafted player. I think Gabe Vincent is shooting lights out. Duncan Robinson, a role player that has been in the finals before. So I think Miami's role players are playing a little bit better these playoffs, because, I mean, the Nuggets role players have been really good, but their run has been spearheaded by their stars, Jokic and Murray, playing out of this world. So it's a tough question to answer. I'm going to lean Denver only because at some point these Miami guys have to regress a little bit, but I have no problem going Miami's role players either, because they're definitely proving they're for real this postseason.
Yeah, I'm going with Denver's role players, and for me, it's not particularly close. I mean, in part because you have a clear defined hierarchy of your 1 and 1A star, 1A and 1B star with Jokic and Murray. Everybody else fits in really nicely into their roles behind that. But I've got pulled up here on Basketball Reference, and it's one of many, many stats that you could look at to compare benches. But when you look at Denver's rotation, the only player who is shooting below 40% from the field is Jeff Green, and he's hitting like 37.5% from the field.
He's old.
And when you're looking at guys shooting from three, Murray is just a tick under 40% shooting from three. That's not necessarily the strength of his game, but you've got Michael Porter. He's above 40%, as is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as is Nikola Jokic. I mean, he's not the role player, obviously, but I think that Denver, because they have two stars, their role players are even less heralded. Whereas for the Heat, because Jimmy Butler's really their only star, the role players kind of take on an oversized narrative impact on the game. Where when you look at their numbers, everybody on Miami, for the most part, shooting pretty well as well, but I don't think quite to the same level. And I think the difference is that with Miami, you have different guys stepping up on different nights, right? Like for a while there, Gabe Vincent was the top role player. And then as we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, Caleb Martin was the go-to guy as far as being the top guy. We've seen Max Strus pop on occasion. Kyle Lowry as well. So Miami kind of has like they rotate on who their top role player is, where I think with Denver, I want consistency in the NBA Finals. I want guys who know exactly what their role is. That I mean, they've been much healthier than the Heat have, so they have had this as an advantage to use the entirety of the regular season as essentially a build-out for what their plan of attack is going to be in the playoffs, so that we get to this point, and for as immensely talented as Michael Porter Jr. is, he's not being reckless and taking, my turn shots, that are outside of the set or outside of the plays called. He's saying, okay, I'm going to fit right into this role here, even though I am really talented. Even if you put me in, say, I don't know, Charlotte, or if you put me in Houston or San Antonio, where I am the guy, I could show out and be a much more talented individual player. Or
and
he's
least, capable of doing that. Again,
he's capable of doing
a lesser team, but he could be
right.
the
but
guy
the fact
on
that he's
certain
accepted
NBA teams.
that role as the third option and is committed to playing good defense, getting the rebounds, and not not taking too many shots and realizing, hey, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, these are the guys that brought us here. Using that Michael Jordan quote of "You can fly, you just got to hold on to the cape." So that's I'm going to go with Denver on this one. I think they've been solid all throughout the playoffs. Miami, they've had guys kind of go up and down a little bit. They've rotated, so I'm just going to go with consistency and the better bench in Denver.
That's fair.
So in terms of the next one, I lost the rundown. Here we go. Coaching edge. Well, I mean, I betrayed this earlier in the program when I said Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA as of right now. I mean, if you want to go legacy wise, it's going to be Pop out of San Antonio and kind of how he's been coaching. But as far as in game tactics, setting the tone, it has to be Eric Spoelstra, right? I mean, all respect to Mike Malone, but it's Spoelstra.
Yeah, I think it's Spoelstra, but I think Michael Malone has proven to be a top 5 coach in the NBA today. I think I'm going to go with Spo, but I don't think it's such an enormous edge. I think that it's actually 2 coaches that know how to get the best out of both their star players and their role players. It's not something like I saw something, someone said this online. I don't know who it was, but maybe it was Shaq that said this, but it's the coach's job to get the role players playing better. The superstar should already be great. The coach doesn't matter as much for a superstar. And I didn't entirely agree with that because I think a coach could transform a superstar, as we saw with Phil Jackson, the triangle offense with the Bulls. Michael Jordan went from scoring 35 points to scoring maybe 30, 31, which is still a lot of points, obviously. But he incorporated more of that ball movement, more of that passing. Phil Jackson knew how to get the best out of his role players and his superstar, Michael Jordan. I think it's kind of a similar thing with both of these guys because you were literally just saying it, Tom Casselman. Michael Porter Jr. could be the guy on a specific NBA team. Aaron Gordon has been the guy on the Magic. I mean, they have guys who have put their egos aside, who fit their roles. And I think Michael Malone has to get a lot of credit for that. He's getting the most out of Jokic, too, because if you have Nikola Jokic, in some ways, I think he's in some ways kind of tricky to coach because do you really want him scoring? Do you want him passing? Like he could very easily say, look, Nikola, post up, shoot the ball this many times. No one will stop you in the post, but he's kind of like getting that assist game out of Jokic. Because you look at what Jokic was doing 3-4 years ago, he was getting, 6-7 assists, which is the high number for centers, but he's up to like 10, 11. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a lot more production from this guy. And I think that he's really kind of embraced making that role work. So I think even though I'm going to go with Spoelstra, Michael Malone, I think is easily the most underrated coach in the NBA.
Sure.
I mean, you can make a case that we have the 2 best coaches in the league in this series. So I do think Spoelstra, though, again, same deal. He gets the most out of Jimmy Butler, but he gets the most out of these guys. And I do agree with you what you were saying about the benches. The Nuggets have more consistent, more defined roles. But one of these guys, like this night it's this guy, this night it's that guy. I know Spoelstra absolutely hates when people ask him about his undrafted players. He hates it. He will go crazy. He absolutely hates it. But part of having these undrafted guys, giving them the confidence to succeed, because believe it or not, Tom, these guys are human beings just like us. They all get nervous. I mean, they all have moments of self-doubt. Part of those undrafted players stepping up in moments like this, that speaks to coaching leadership. That speaks to Eric Spoelstra, speaks to Jimmy Butler, the leaders of that Miami team. I think Spo has to get a lot of credit for getting those guys to step up. And I mean, we see it all the time. Game 1 of each of the playoff series, Miami has not only covered game 1, they have won game 1 in every single playoff series so far. What does that tell you? I mean, look at, they played a 7-game series against Boston. They played against the 1 seed in Milwaukee. They played against a well-coached team in Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks. Every single series right off the bat before we have the adjustments. Like the players make adjustments too, Tom. But when before the players have a chance to make adjustments, what coach has his team the best prepared? It's Eric Spoelstra every single time. I mean, game one, Miami has been unbelievable. That's how they're an 8 seed in the NBA Finals. You win game one, your odds get much better. So Spo, for me, is the best coach in the NBA, but Michael Malone, not far behind.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be entertaining to see how they kind of match up as the series goes on. And that's kind of like we talked about a lot of the quote tangible things. Let's talk a little bit about intangibles as well. I've got a couple on my mind heading into this. I mean, the first one, the easiest one to kind of look at that's not really well defined in what its impact is rest versus rust.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the Heat don't have a ton of rest having come off of a 7-game series, but they get a couple of games because game one of the NBA Finals was slated to start Thursday, June 1st. So they wrapped up their series. They have a couple of days to get ready. That feels like they're kind of in the flow of things, even though that was a very, very taxing series. Whereas you look at the Denver Nuggets, I mean, obviously the individual games were close and well contested, but you know, when you win in four, you get to take a nice long time to cool your heels, and it's kind of a question of when you have a team like the Nuggets, where in the Western Conference Finals in particular, all of their significant role players were shooting above 40% from three. They were in a rhythm. They were clicking. They were going through guys or going through opponents rather up to this point, and now they've had to sit for a really long time. So I think that's one intangible. Again, I don't know
Well, who
who
do you
necessarily
favor?
that. Well, that's what I'm about to say. I don't
Yeah.
really know what that's going to be because I don't think that
You
there's
don't know.
really I don't think that there's a strong correlation between being the more rested team or the more in flow team and what impact that has because it's one of those I'm going to go a little bit of Latin here. It's one of those post hoc ergo propter hocs where no matter what the
What in
result,
the world? What does that mean? Remind me. I should know just
it's
because I listen to Tom Casselman vocabulary on a weekly basis.
it roughly translates to after which, therefore, because of.
Oh God, that made
So
it
so
so
it
much simpler.
so in that case, if the Heat win, it's because they were in a really good flow and the Nuggets were rusty. If the Nuggets win, it's because the Heat were tired and the Nuggets had time to rest and recuperate. That's what I'm
Okay,
saying
sure.
is going to be kind of
The
that
classic
narrative.
journalism storyline.
Exactly. But the thing I want to key in on as far as my intangible goes, because I heard the statistic and I really, really liked it. Are you familiar with what clutch games are defined as from a
The last minute of
statistical?
games.
Last 5 minutes of a game
Okay.
with a point differential of 5 points or less. Miami has played in 54 of those in the regular season. And they had a record of 32 and 22, so winning about 59 and change percent of
Pretty
those
good.
games in clutch moments, which would lead me to think, okay, Miami's knows what they're doing in this situation. But then I went and I scrolled down because I had it ranked by the number of games. The Nuggets played in 37 clutch games. Their record is 22 and 15, which is also about 59% and change winning percentage. So they're equally good in the clutch. And you're going to hear that about Miami because, like I said, of all the narrative things that built up with the fact that they have these undrafted players and Jimmy Butler and yada, 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 that these guys are always in these tight, close games. But Denver is just as good in those games.
We
The
saw it against
difference
the
for me
Lakers.
the difference for me and the intangible for me is that the Nuggets are good enough to not be in that situation as often. This kind of falls into the regression of the mean or the differential of the one run game or the single possession game or whatever you want to call it. That yes, Miami comes out winning a majority of those games, but the fact that they are in as many as they have been, and I know injuries are a part of that, but the fact that they have been in as many clutch games as they have been signals to me that they're just getting by. They're just getting those wins. And that is important, but give me the team that's not in those close situations nearly as often as the team that I'm going to go
Sure.
with. So I think my intangible is that both teams equally good in the clutch, but Denver's good enough that we're not going to see quite that many clutch games in the series.
Okay. I kind of disagree in my opinion. Now I know we'll get to this predictions here in the next segment. Don't want to give too much away, but I think it's going to be kind of similar to the Lakers series for me, that it's going to be a lot of really
Mm,
close games, but not necessarily a very deep series. But as far as intangibles, I think Denver has the edge for me. I think the home court is huge for them.
hmm
They've been the best team in home court, this season. They haven't lost a home playoff game all year. The altitude has to affect Miami a little bit. Like you said, tired legs. And I'm going to be completely honest, Tom. I don't know the statistics, but I think it's different team to team. The whole rust versus rest thing. Uh, it's very hard to guess who's going to affect, but I do lean towards thinking that's more of like the first half of game one. I think once they get on the court, they play a half of basketball. I think that rust is going to go away for Denver. I don't look at it as being a whole game. Maybe even if it is a whole game, it's not a whole series thing. Whereas those tired legs, especially at altitude, having played all those games from Miami, I do tend to lean, and again, this is a very tricky thing, to base off, but my gut feeling says I'd rather be rested the way Denver is as opposed to Miami playing a tough series. So I do give a little bit of an edge with an asterisk of not knowing for sure, but a little bit of an edge for Denver because they are more rested. They do have the home court. And I think that I think that Charles and Shaq said that. Maybe it was Charles said it on the broadcast a few weeks ago. When you're the home team, when the whole city's behind you, there's a sort of like different feel to what you're doing. I mean, the Nuggets have never been here before. Miami has been at this point. I think that it's just one of those things where it just feels like it's Denver's season.
hmm
Just that little extra thing, like let's win this first one. For our city, let's get the first NBA final for our franchise. And I think that it's a big one for Jokic too, because I think it's Jokic's chance to really cement himself as the best player in the game. Because he won those
it's
two
his
straight.
Giannis series.
It's his Giannis series, yeah, from a couple years ago. He won those two MVPs, but Denver was not really that good in the playoffs. I know they got in the Western Conference Finals, but they had like a losing record that playoff series. Like they got by in 7 in the first round, got by in
hmm
7 in the second round. I think last year was it like a 4-game, 5-game series against the Warriors in the first round? Like they've had pretty much, to be honest, like zero real playoff success, both in the Jokic era and in the franchise's history. I mean, it's one of those where it just feels like, let's win this for the franchise. Let's win it for us. I think that has to be an intangible for me. Like we say, Tom, role players play better at home, although Caleb Martin obviously has proven that stat to be wrong. But having the extra game at home is an advantage for me for Denver. So I do like the Nuggets having more intangibles personally in this series. Not to mention, it feels like they're a little bit healthier as a team. Like, how
hmm
does that Tyler Hero, like, I know we're talking about role players and stuff. Like, when does he come back in this series? Does he come back? Does he actually hurt the Heat with the rhythm they're on right now? I don't know. Those are questions that are yet to be answered. But I do give a slight edge to Denver on the intangible side. I pretty much give them an edge everywhere, but maybe the coaching, and that's even closer than you may think, because I think Malone is also an excellent coach.
Absolutely. So that leads us to the ultimate conclusion of the last prediction we will make on this NBA season. Certainly have had ups and downs with that. Got a
You're
hair wrong.
doing pretty good,
I,
Tom.
I think I initially started out with Boston over Denver in the NBA Finals, but quite frankly, over the playoffs, Denver just proved time and again that they are the superior team. And no surprise to anybody who's watching this show, no surprise to you, Kamen, that I am going with the Denver Nuggets in this one. The thing that might be surprising is the number of games, and I'll go ahead and I'll give a gentleman's sweep. I'm going to call for the Nuggets in 5. I think that Miami has played, well above what anybody expected as far as them being a bottom half of the playoff bracket on the
Except for
Eastern
Jimmy
Conference
Butler.
side, except of course everybody on South Beach. But
He said last year they're going to be back in the same situation, They lost Game 7 last year. They were back, and he said they'll be
Yeah,
prepared and win. They did win.
they did come through with that one. I mean, not very many people were on the Miami Heat this year, so they certainly have outperformed the general public's expectations for them. And along the way, they've had, like every team has with making it to the NBA Finals, you get a little bit of help along the way. You know, you get a Chris Paul who's not playing particularly well, and you get really short rotations against Phoenix, so that helps Denver get to this point. You get a LeBron James who has carried the Lakers through the first two rounds of the playoffs and simply not necessarily ran out of gas, but wasn't capable of being at the same level he'd been the previous two rounds because the Lakers needed him to be all worldly in order just to get to that point. So the Nuggets get a little bit of a break there. So I think that, both teams have capitalized on the breaks that they've been given, but I think Denver's just the more talented team. They have the better star matchup of Jokic versus Butler. They have the better second star matchup of Murray versus Adebayo. I think they have the better role players. I think Spoelstra is an amazing coach. You made a good argument for Mike Malone being not as distant as I perhaps put him in that conversation, because he is certainly a good coach in his own right. And then, like you said, the intangibles of home court advantage, both teams experience in clutch play. There's just too many edges for me on the Denver Nuggets to go against them in this one, and I think they're just so much more talented than the Miami Heat. And they're so much more disciplined than the Boston Celtics that with that combination of better talent, better discipline, Miami's not going to catch some of the same breaks that they caught in the playoffs up to this point.
Yeah. By the way, I like Mike Malone and how he's got a chip on his shoulder. He keeps talking about
Mm-hmm.
how, the media wanted, and it's true, the media wanted to make it about the Lakers. Oh, we won game 1, but the Lakers made adjustments. Oh, game 2 was close, but it was just like, I like Mike Malone's, I like his post-game conferences. He's not shy about saying the Nuggets are disrespected, which they are. You look at this Denver team, certainly have a very good team. But, up and down, I think they have the best roster perhaps in today's game, maybe. But I think the NBA at the current moment is maybe the deepest it's ever been. All these teams have superstars, almost all at least. Probably about
Mm-hmm.
80 to 90% of the teams in the league have a guy who could really go off any night. And a lot of them have a second guy as well. So I don't know talent-wise that they're an all-time great team talent-wise. I mean, they're very good, obviously, but they're not one of the all-time great teams per se. And I'm not ready to say that they're one of the all-time great teams overall either, but they are exactly that, a team. It's a fine old machine. I think everyone knows their roles. I think that, MPJ knows he's the third option. Aaron Gordon knows he's the fourth option. Bruce Brown, Caldwell Pope know whoever's hot that day, you're the fifth option, you're the sixth. Jeff Green's got that veteran leadership. He knows his role. And I think what's great about them is it's kind of similar to that Giannis and Middleton setup from a couple years ago. Jokic is easily the best overall player on the Nuggets, but in a given game, in a given series, Jokic doesn't care about being the leading scorer. He's happy to get 25, 10, and 10. Murray gets, 35 points. They win the game. It doesn't matter. Jokic
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care, Tom. That is very, very rare. Literally, in my opinion, I can think of maybe 2 superstars in the history of the NBA that truly don't care about who scores the most points. They care about winning. They care about doing everything. It's LeBron and Jokic. I mean, he literally is like a prime LeBron. I think is a little bit better because he's a better athlete, but he's basically LeBron James, maybe a little bit weaker on defense. Doesn't have the same explosiveness, but this is like LeBron James 2.0 we're watching as a big man. He knows exactly what he has to do. The team just functions so well together. It's just like they are literally the definition of a team. You talk about the whole superstars, the super teams. And I think super teams can work to an extent. I think that LeBron and Wade had great chemistry. I think the Celtics had chemistry. But this is the definition of a true basketball team where everyone knows their role, everyone knows what to do on a given night, and they go out and do it consistently. And that makes it easy because Jokic gets so many easy looks for his teammates. He gets so many easy looks for himself, then even makes the tough ones because he's just that good. So better overall team. I've got Denver also in 5 games, Tom. I would be absolutely shocked if Miami can win a road game in this series. I mean, the only way it could happen is game one if Denver is very rusty. But outside
Mhm.
of game one, I don't see them winning in that environment, in that arena, the altitude, somewhere where Denver is very comfortable. Denver has owned this series, by the way. I think they've won like 9 of the last 10 matchups, 6 in a row head to head. I mean, it's been all Denver. I know a head-to-head regular season, not the same feel, but something to be said about that matchup. Miami has not matched up well against Denver. I'm going to give Miami 1 game simply because this team is too well coached, too well cultured. They will fight for sure. I think it's possible Miami forces it to 6 games. I think 6 is more likely than a
Mhm.
sweep. I think like if they win both game 3 and 4 at home, it gets interesting. But I think over the course of the series, Denver's talent will prevail, Denver's focus will prevail. And like you said, both teams are very good in the clutch. I think that's a series that maybe Miami doesn't have that clutch advantage, where Boston, as we've seen, not very good in the clutch. Denver is very good in the clutch, as the Lakers know very well from the last series. So I will say officially Nuggets in 5, but sheerly for Miami's gut and effort, if they make it a little bit more competitive, I would not be shocked.
Yeah, and I'm sure the NBA is hoping for a competitive series as well because the massive markets of Miami and Denver not going to be drawing a great number, but they'll have at least a couple of Chicagoans tuning in to
Mm-hmm.
ABC for the NBA Finals to be sure. As I think this is going to be a fantastic thing to watch. Um, Something I'm not going to be tuning in for because I don't have cable. I don't have any streaming service that provides me with TNT, my Sling subscription from March Madness that I forgot to cancel. So I got a little bit of the NBA playoffs as well. Ran out, which means on TNT I will not be watching the Stanley Cup Finals. But I've heard rumor that it's the Las Vegas Golden Knights as they are returning to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since. So let me
Second time in
scroll up to it.
history.
Second time in history, first time since 2018, just a few years after they were an expansion team. And then they're going up against the Florida Panthers, who haven't been in the Stanley Cup final since 1996, when they were handed a sweep from the Colorado Avalanche. So, Kamen, are you going with the Vegas Knights on this one? According to Bovada, they are favored to win the series at minus 125. Are you going for the upset with the Florida Panthers plus money at 105?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty close, by the way. I wouldn't say either is not a heavy favorite. I mean, I'm going to go Florida Panthers. They're the hottest team right now. Neither team has won a Stanley Cup, by the way. So
Mm-hmm.
we could essentially have the first Stanley Cup. You know, we will have the first Stanley Cup in the franchise's history. No matter what team wins, the Nuggets win will be the first championship for them. Speaks to the depth across all of sports. How really it is anybody's game right now in all of pro sports, at least wide open field. I'm going with the Panthers because what's that saying in hockey? I mean, the last time a team had the best regular season and won the Stanley Cup was the 2013 Blackhawks. It's just like baseball. It's not about who's the better team. It's about who's the better team at the right time. The Panthers were down 3-1, Tom, against the Boston Bruins, the best record in the history of hockey in the first round. Since that 3-1 lead, they won 3 in a row against Boston, 4 of 5 against Toronto, then a clean sweep, 4-0 in the conference finals. They've lost 1 game since then.
Mm-hmm.
They are the hotter team at the moment. They are the better team. Not saying Vegas hasn't been great, but Vegas has not cruised as easily as Florida. I know they won in 6 games in their last series. They were up 3-0, actually. That series got a little bit tighter late. But I'm going to go Florida Panthers, their first Stanley Cup in the history of the franchise. Let's go Florida. As guess what, Tom? The 8th seed. We got 2 8 seeds in the state of Florida. Miami Heat, Florida Panthers, 8 seeds, both in the respective finals that they're playing in.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the underdog Panthers as well. Panther, a very underrated cat, very underrated animal in the animal
There
kingdom. So
you
give me them
go.
over the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, I always go for a little bit of an upset whenever I'm not sure who to pick between the favorite and the underdog, and this also seems particularly close. So I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers on that one. Locks of the week coming up. Kamen, you continue your good vibes, your good rolls as you are flourishing and prospering both on and off the show.
That's
Whereas
true.
my favorite phrase is coming back to bite me a little bit, regression to the mean, as I continue to stumble a little bit,
It,
get
all,
bit
it
by
only took
the
it only took me about most of the season to get rolling on locks of the week. Where was this two, three
better
months ago?
better late
Better
than
late than
never.
never.
I think we're what, like 10 picks apart now. It's the gap is shortened considerably.
I don't know. We'll see. I was 2-1 this last week. I had Rays -1.5 over the Blue Jays at +110. Rays winning 7-3. I had the Heat +8 at the Celtics. Like I said, this is the classic, curse of the show because I bet on Miami online every single game this series, Tom. All 7 games I bet on the Heat to cover. They covered 5 out of 7. And one of the 2 they didn't cover, of course, was when I picked it on the show. Celtics did win 110-97 in that game last week that I had the Heat +8. I had the Panthers -115 to beat the Carolina Hurricanes. Correct. Panthers winning 4-3. That was actually in game 4. They won with 4 seconds left. It was a very dramatic game. Panthers winning. Imagine that. 4 seconds left in the game to make the Stanley Cup Finals.
Hmm.
That's pretty iconic for Florida. So you are 1-2, Tom. You also had the Rays -1.5 over the Blue Jays. Loving that. We both won on that one. You had A's Mariners over 8.5 runs. That was wrong. 6-1 Mariners with 7 runs. And then you had the Orioles plus 0.5 runs in the first 5 against the Yankees. Yankees were up 5-1 after 5. I think the O's might have came back and won that game. So
They
you would have
won
been
like
better.
9-5. It was
You
ridiculous.
would have been better off betting on the game
Hmm.
spread, Mr. First 5 innings. So what do you have this week, Tom?
Well, certainly not any lessons learned. Give me the Mariners minus half a run in the first 5 over the Yankees. You can get that at +105 on Bovada.
Oof.
So another first 5 there. George Kirby on the mound against Clark Schmidt. Kirby much better numbers on the season, and the Mariners playing good baseball. Let's go ahead and give me the Arizona Diamondbacks -1.5. So I'm taking the game run line over the Colorado Rockies at +115. So a couple of plus money Casselmans here. Dinelson Lamet going for the Rockies. His ERA is well above 12. He's been not good this year. The Diamondbacks starter, I think it's Tommy Kelly or Tommy Carey. I'd have to look it up on the baseball reference tab that I closed earlier. He has not been phenomenal, but the Diamondbacks have certainly been playing really good baseball this year. So give me the Diamondbacks on the run line there. And then found a game, Aaron Nola and the Phillies.
Mm.
You can get that at -117 if you want them on the game line on the just to win outright over Carlos Carrasco and the Mets. The Mets have been stumbling a little bit. Carrasco's ERA above 6, I believe. So give me the Phillies over the Mets. All baseball today. Staying away from basketball because I just do not know how to feel about that 9-point line with the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. I have a feeling, Common, that you do, however, have an opinion on that.
I do have an opinion. I was eyeing it, but I decided to go for something a little different. So, for the
Oh,
record, I'm not entirely sure, but I would lean on Miami +9, +8.5, I think is what I saw more recently.
hmm.
But the only reason why I'm a little hesitant is if they get tired in the second half. Now, Miami has covered every game 1 of the playoffs so far. I'm going to go a little bit alternate instead, though. I'm going to go with the Miami +5 first half line instead for my official pick, because I think that, Denver might be a little bit rusty just in the first half. I think by the time the second half rolls around, Denver's going to be just fine. I think Miami, has won every game won so far in the playoffs. Eric Spoelstra is the best coach at preparing his team against another team. We said this both. Denver has the better players as the game goes on, as the series goes on. We'll see that on the court. But I think that Miami's going to get off to a good start. It's what they do in all these playoff series. Miami +5 in the first half. Feel pretty good about that spread at the Denver Nuggets Thursday night, game 1. I'm going to go with another basketball game line in this series. This is something I don't like to do. You know this very well, Tom. I don't like to do it unless I'm feeling really good about it. I'm feeling good about it. I'm going to go under 219 points in game 1. That is a very high total. I think that both teams are pretty good defensively. By the way, Denver's all of a sudden improvement in the playoffs this year compared to last year. A lot of it is the defense. This team has improved greatly defensively. I'm not saying that they are first team all NBA defense, but you look at Jokic, you look at Jamal Murray, Michael Porter. None of those guys are traditionally great defenders. They've all improved a little bit. Like a little bit of improvement helps the whole team get better. Miami, as we know, Tom, is very good on defense. It's what they do. The whole rust versus rest thing, I'm going to bank on that. The Nuggets are a little bit rusty, and I'm going to bank on the Heat being a little bit tired. What does that mean? Less points, 219. I mean, we see less points in the playoffs, less points in the finals. The coaches have more of a chance to scheme that team. We have, efforts at an all-time high. So we do traditionally see unders hitting more in the playoffs, more in the finals. So I'm going to go under 219 points in game 1. And lastly, I've got a baseball game. Dodgers Nationals over 9.5 runs at -105. This game tipping a little bit later this afternoon. Actually, this is two pitchers who are probably better than what the numbers show right now, but I'm not banking on them to get better this game. Syndergaard for the Dodgers, Tom, his ERA is 6.27. Corbin for the Nationals, 4.88, and he's facing an incredible Dodger lineup. Over 9.5 runs in this game feels pretty good. The whole series so far has been high scoring. Look for 10 runs or more in the Dodgers and Nationals this afternoon.
Sounds good. Trivia time. I've got one for the NBA Finals, Kamen. I hope you like it.
I will. I found the good one too, by the way, but go ahead, Tom.
Excellent. So Pat Riley is an absolute staple in NBA history.
Yes,
he has been a player. He has been a coach. He's been an executive. And he's been to the NBA Finals before. Can you tell me how many times in his overall NBA
20.
career? Close.
I saw this stat and I'm blanking. 19.
It is 19. 19 times Pat Riley has been a part of the NBA Finals, either as a player, as a coach, or as an executive. Bonus points if you can name the percentage of all NBA Finals he's been a part of.
50, I think.
About
40
half of that. It's 24.7.
24, okay.
Percent
that's
of
a lot.
All of the finals in NBA history. A quarter of the NBA Finals have had Pat Riley.
It's got to be like probably over 50 since he was eligible, or close to it at least, right? I guess he was a player way back in the day, so I could be off.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but that's just like, just in the sum totality of his career and everything is nothing short of amazing. And I mean, he was coaching the Heat for that Wade Shaq series, and I just didn't know the stat, and I didn't know when it was LeBron James. But that is an absolute phenomenal statistic, and just a testament to the impact he has had on the game and on the varying organizations
and by the way, he's the front office. He's the guy who finds these guys. I mean, Eric Spoelstra, he found out of nowhere to be the head coach. When people when he brought in Eric Spoelstra as the head coach, people were like, "Wait, what? You should take over Pat Riley." They started 5 .500 the first 15 games.
Yeah, I remember that.
And folks were calling for Spoelstra's job. They said, Pat Riley, come back out of the front office, coach these guys. He said, no, Spo's my guy. And guess what? He knew. So maybe these undrafted guys, this coach with the no-name resume in Spoelstra, Pat Riley, I guess, really knows what he's doing. He's done it with a lot of franchises, by the way. The Lakers as a coach, the Knicks as a coach, the Heat as a coach. Now, front office with the Heat, player with the Lakers. He was actually a Kentucky basketball player. Actually won a lot in college, too. So everywhere this man goes, he wins. What's that saying? Everything he touches turns into gold, right? Including Caleb Martin. That's probably what it was. Pat Riley touched him on the shoulder before the playoffs, and Caleb Martin transformed.
What do you have for trivia?
All right, trivia. Most conference final points in NBA history for Caleb Martin, 132. Who is 132 points in the conference finals? Yep. Most points by a conference or NBA finals by an undrafted player in the modern era. Who is the second most points either in the conference finals or the NBA finals for an undrafted player? Second most all time.
I'm going to go for a technicality on this one.
Okay.
I'm going to go for Moses Malone because he went from the ABA to the NBA. So technically he wasn't drafted, but is that it?
That's not what ESPN Stats and Info has. So I'm going to give you a clue right off the bat because this transitions very well. This guy was a former player for Pat Riley.
Former player for Pat Riley. Undrafted.
So second most points in playoff history for a conference or an NBA final series.
So if he played for Pat Riley, I'm going to go back to the 06 team and say maybe Eddie Jones.
Played for Pat Riley a while before that.
Okay, so that goes back to, I'm going to say Lakers. Because that was the Lakers of the
not
late
the Lakers,
80s.
The 80s. It's not the Lakers.
So for when he was on with the Knicks? Oh man, this is really challenging.
Yeah. I think he coached them in this series. Let me double check just to make sure. I think he was the coach during the series. So let's see here.
Was John Starks drafted?
John Starks is the answer.
Oh, is it?
Wow. Yeah.
And mortal enemy.
Hater.
Mortal enemy of the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, John Starks. He was... Oh, yeah, he was coaching the Knicks at the time, 91 to 95. It was the 94 finals that John Starks had the most points prior to what Caleb Martin did this series. So that was Starks against the Rockets, which actually the Rockets won that series. But, yeah, that's crazy. And by the way, I have it pulled up on my phone, Pat Riley's Wikipedia page. He was... let's see here. NBA champion as a player in 72, assistant coach in 1980, head coach, 5-time NBA champion, and then 2-time NBA champion as executive as well, Pat Riley.
A lot of rings.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good for Pat Riley.
Low-key of all the athletes to never win a championship on a team sport, I think Patrick Ewing probably gets the least amount of recognition. Like everybody talks Karl Malone, Dan Marino, all that. Too few people. Charles Barkley, another one. Too few people talk about how Patrick
talked a lot about that too, though. Barkley does.
No, I'm saying like they do, but I'm saying of all the people who get talked about for not having won a ring, Patrick Ewing slides right under the radar.
Yeah, he's
good. Unfortunate because he seems like he's a pretty good guy and everything.
Doesn't sign many autographs either. Pretty rare autograph in the memorabilia business.
I did not know that, but that could be a plug for what you got going on the show.
Ultimate autographs, baby.
Salutes and statements. I'm going to get started with a statement. This was more or less, this is two sides of a similar enough coin that I'm going to link it together. I'm going to start off with a salute to Liam Hendricks, the Chicago
Yes,
White Sox relief
that's a good
pitcher.
one.
He is returned to the mound over Memorial Day weekend after battling stage 4 lymphoma. He was diagnosed in the off season, and in talking about it, he kind of made wasn't surprised by that because last year he was pitching and he was talking about how he had some lumps and simply just kind of gutted through it. So he was pitching. He was probably pitching while having lymphoma last season, which is an absolute marvel, quite frankly. And the fact that his last chemo session was less than 2 months ago, April 5th, was his last chemo session, and he rang the bell and is now returned to the Chicago White Sox. Is now pitching on the mound. You know, spent extra time in the minor leagues on his rehabs assignment because he wanted to be fully ready to go. Came up, threw a fastball 96 miles an hour, a couple ticks off where he usually is, but that's to be expected. That's still nothing short of a miracle. So salute to him, a salute to his wife Christy. Knowing people who have battled with cancer and won, it's certainly not a fight that you fight alone. You have a lot of people who are on your side, in your corner, supporting you, and a lot of people who are suffering along with you as well. So it's always a great story when anybody, but especially folks who have the visibility of a guy like Liam Hendricks are able to overcome and return to doing something that they love and something that he viewed as a challenge and kind of used baseball as a motivator, as this is why I'm going to beat this thing. He easily could have started the season on the 60-day injured list, could have been an all-star break or near the trade deadline when he was coming back, but he said, no, don't put me on that injured list, I will be back. And sure enough, within like a day or two of that, whether or not if he were on the 60-day injured list, he's pitching again. So a salute to Liam Hendricks and his wife on that front. And then my statement, unfortunately, is going to be a little bit on the more dour side. Another
Oh, here
Chicago
we
sports
go.
athlete, Alonzo Ball. My statement is I don't think he's going to be playing in the NBA again. And I mean, this is something that's not really like a breaking news thing, but uh, there is this cadaver cartilage replacement or transplant that he is going under as he's taking I believe, a third operation on his knee since he last played. I think it was like July of 22 was the last time that Lonzo Ball played in the NBA for the Chicago Bulls. Um, this is kind of an experimental. Not a lot of people have had this procedure done, and I think there have been a couple of guys who have played professional basketball, if not at the NBA level, at a couple levels lower. There have been a few people who have had this operation done before. None of them played basketball at a competitive level of any kind. So this feels a lot like this is more of a quality of life procedure so that, just walking around, waking up and not being in a tremendous amount of pain. I think that's where things are trending with Lonzo Ball and the Chicago Bulls. It's really unfortunate because, I mean, he's a young guy. He's like, what, 26, something like that. Has a ton of talent, certainly has
Good
a,
player.
a good player who has, a big name thanks to his dad. Very, very well regarded, but has kind of almost marvelously done a great job or miraculously done a great job of being his own person in spite of kind of the outlandish caricature that his dad puts on as a persona. It's not a statement I'm happy to make about Lonzo
Sure.
Ball, but I highly suspect that we will not be seeing him play basketball. He's going to join an unfortunate list of guys who had a ton of talent, but simply were not able to stay healthy for the prime of their NBA careers.
When healthy, he was very explosive, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's easily good enough to be, a starting NBA point guard. He's without
Absolutely.
question a starter in the NBA. Given season
Willing
is an
defender.
all-star, very good player, Alonzo. I did read an article. I don't want to speculate how much of this is true, but what this article was claiming, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but again, it's kind of a little outlandish to say for sure, but the article focused on how bad the big baller brand shoes that he wore were. That's when he first started having the
Mm,
injuries. He had his own shoe line. They said they are by far the worst shoes they've ever seen any
interesting.
basketball player wear. And they're saying that those shoes led to those injuries early on in his career. He went away from him a couple years ago, but they're saying the original injury he got because of maybe playing with those shoes did hurt him. So just
Interesting.
keep in mind, you got to have good stuff, good apparel, man. So just
New Balance.
yeah, Nike maybe. Did you ever see that movie with Matt Damon, the Nike movie? It's so good.
I have not seen Air. No.
Oh, it's so good. It was Matt Damon's best movie he's ever done. So either that or Rounders. You've probably never seen Rounders either.
No, I've seen Rounders, but wouldn't
Okay.
stuff like Good Will Hunting be up there for some?
That's
of
up there. Those are the top three. Those are his
Okay.
top three movies.
That's
They're on
I'm just saying, like,
par with each
one
other.
of his best movies. That's Tall Timber, because he's certainly a decorated actor. for sure.
Unbelievable in this movie, Tom. Matt Damon he should win the Oscar for this performance. It was iconic. Such
Okay.
a great role. You got to check it out. People are actually saying that, not just me, Tom. He is an Oscar nominee. I think he's got a contender for the Oscar with his role in this movie.
Interesting.
It was unbelievable. Viola Davis as Michael Jordan's mom as a supporting actor. And she'll get some nominations too. She was incredible in that movie. And of course, we have why am I blanking on his name right now?
Is it Ben Affleck?
Ben Affleck as Phil Knight was also interesting in a secondary role. So it was a really good movie. A lot of basketball jokes, a lot of life stuff, perseverance, just a movie you should check out. My statement of the week, Tom, and I've been super busy with work, Memorial Day, the wedding was crazy. I was the co-best man, danced like crazy, went hiking the next day with my mom. So I was kind of last minute cramming research because last night the girlfriend and I were watching Ted Lasso. Tears were shed. Arguably the greatest show of all time coming to an end. Still having a hard time processing. You got to watch Ted Lasso, Tom. It is the best show out there. It's incredible. But it's not a soccer show, by the way. It's a live show. But literally last minute cramming. I didn't actually have a statement prepared, but I thought of it as we kept talking about these playoffs. Specifically, you inspired my statement. When you were talking about when was Jimmy Butler drafted, I looked it up, 30th overall, one of the last picks in the first round. Nikola Jokic, by the way, famously drafted in the second round during a Taco Bell commercial. So shout out to T-Bell. We're talking about all of these Miami Heat undrafted players. What was it, 7 of these guys playing in the conference finals? Their second or maybe best player in the series was undrafted Caleb Martin. Their third best player was probably Gabe Vincent, also undrafted. And maybe Duncan Robinson was 4th best and Max Strus 5th best. I mean, we had 4 of the 5 best players for the Heat, undrafted guys. The Nuggets, center. We were holding up. Was it 41? What was he drafted?
44.
44 during a Taco Bell commercial. I mean, come on. What's my statement, Tom? My statement is that forget tanking. It's just dumb. The smart organizations will recruit. They'll find the talent. They'll build around the talent. They'll get the offseason acquisitions. I mean, what have the Nuggets done? They've quietly assembled a superstar team around Nikola Jokic, the 44th overall pick during a Taco Bell commercial. You do not have to tank. You don't need the number 1 overall pick to win. These teams can win, in the later rounds. We have the 2 best players in the playoffs, 30th and 44th overall picks. Forget tanking. Dallas Mavericks, they tanked at the end of the season. They probably wouldn't have gotten in the play-in game. But you have a Luka Doncic player. Mavericks would be an 8 seed. In a short game series, you have Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Doncic and Irving, you never know. So stop tanking. All these teams do not do it. And by the way, even if you tank and you get the worst overall record with the NBA lottery, you're not guaranteed the first pick. Didn't the Rockets have the worst record? Who was the worst record this year?
It was either the Rockets or the Spurs. I think they were pretty close.
Let me look it up. I'm going to confirm. My point is, though, tanking does not win championships. I think you can win championships with a smart organization. Worst record in the league was Detroit, actually. And Detroit Didn't Detroit get what pick did they get? Second, third? They didn't get
Fifth.
Victor. What are
Fifth.
they? Fifth? Fifth,
Yeah, they
Tom?
fell out. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the point of tanking, right? The lottery may not even go your way.
Hmm.
So it's just smart decision making, finding the right fits, finding the right players. I mean, this is what the Nuggets are doing. They're finding the right players. They could have easily traded Jamal Murray away. After his, I think it was an ACL injury, he was worried they would trade him. They said, no, we're sticking by you, Jamal Murray. We're sticking with our Taco Bell man, Nikola Jokic. These guys, like, you don't have to have the first overall pick. Even Michael Porter Jr., they got him later in the lottery. He was not a top 10 pick. Didn't have to be. I mean, none of their best players. Jamal Murray actually might be their highest draft pick. Let me look it up real quickly when he was picked. But even he wasn't a top 5 pick. So,
No, he was in the lottery though. I think like
it was a lottery.
11th. I want to
I
say
want to say he
overall.
was 7 too. I'm looking it up right now. Jamal Murray, 7th overall.
7th. Gotcha.
But I mean, even Stephen Curry, I think he was what, 7th, 8th. Clay was in that range. You don't need the number 1 overall pick to win the NBA Finals. Sure, if there's a LeBron James, LeBron James is generational. Victor Wembanyama might be generational. But as we saw with LeBron James, even as we saw with Michael Jordan, you don't win the championship with one player alone. I mean, LeBron wasn't winning championships until we got better players around him. Jordan wasn't winning championships until we got better players around him. Tanking for the first overall pick will not get you a championship alone. You got to have good roster construction. I mean, look at a lot of these teams in the NBA. Who have been the bottom teams the last 20 years? The Hornets, the Wizards. They consistently get high picks. Doesn't matter. The Pistons, which is crazy because that was such a good organization. They were getting that, later talent, the Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, not necessarily like first, second overall pick type players. That's how they were winning. Nowadays, I mean, I'm trying to think the last time, a team with the number 1 overall pick won a championship. Is it Cleveland with LeBron? And he technically left, Tom.
Well, they also had Kyrie on that team.
They already had Kyrie, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a recent
later.
number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Pick. It hasn't happened. I mean, like Shaq with the Magic, one with the Lakers, I'm trying to think the last time. I mean, it was probably Tim Duncan with the Spurs, actually. No,
I'm saying it's Kyrie because he was the number 1 pick for the Cavaliers. LeBron came back and they won a title. So I think that's.
But it just at the whole point, like it doesn't happen all the time. So I'm not a fan of tanking. The Miami Heat have proven that. The Denver Nuggets have proven that. Don't tank. Get good players and figure it out.
Yeah, really quickly, as you mentioned the Jokic thing, that reminded me back at the old barbecue KOMU, in Columbia, Missouri. I remember it was the 2013 NBA draft, and we were waiting on the sportscast, just kind of going through everything. It was the second round, and Missouri had 1 player drafted that year.
Kim English.
It was not Kim English. He was
Marcus
the year prior. Nope.
Alex Oriaki.
It's Alex Oriaki, the 57th overall pick, selected during a commercial break. So we couldn't even use the footage for the newscast.
I remember that. 41, by the way, was Jokic. It was 41. I was right.
Oh, 44. Oh, I thought it was 44. Okay.
Either way, that's still pretty low. That's so funny, right? That footage of Jokic lives on, though. Oh, my gosh. Just iconic. Iconic stuff.
Also, there's all the Bourne movies for Matt Damon. I think there's a lot of stuff before Air, but I will give it
Matt Damon movies?
Yeah, I looked it up as the Bourne movies. I think
those are good, but I think they're not quite on par with the 3 I listed.
There's The Martian, Ford v Ferrari.
Oh, Ford v Ferrari. That's a good movie. Have you seen that one?
The Departed.
Oh, he's good.
There's a lot of Matt Damon movies. So
I still put Air in the top 3. Rounders,
really?
Good Will Hunting, and Air. I think his performance in Air was better than any of those movies you just listed.
I'll check it out to see if it's better.
You did get me with Good Will Hunting. I'll give you that one. He's iconic in that movie as well. Those 3 are like tough to choose. I think those are his 3 that stand out to me.
All right.
Because I think
I'll put it on the list.
The Departed, like, there was so many like amazing actors.
That's
His like
fair.
performance didn't stand out. I mean, like in like Ben Affleck was very good. I mean, the
Mhm.
main character was Matt Damon, made it easier for him. But he really stood out in this movie when he had a lot of other stars in it. Departed had so many iconic actors that
True.
I guess Matt Damon didn't stand out, so to speak.
That
I
makes
mean,
sense. Yeah, I usually think of Jack Nicholson, Leo DiCaprio before I get to Matt Damon in that.
although
Even
I like Matt
Wahlberg
Damon better than Jack Nicholson personally, but
in
not
that
more than
movie
Leo. Well,
or in
maybe not in
general.
that movie. I'm talking in
Yeah,
general.
in that movie, Jack Nicholson stole the whole show.
Yeah. So
But
that's what I'm
that's beside
saying.
the point. Salute your
That's what I'm saying.
sports,
We're
salute your
arguing
movie.
about him being the second or third best actor in that movie alone. You cannot put it
That's
up with
fair.
Air.
But
So
I would say the Bourne movies are all. I mean,
they're
that
very
was all
good,
about him. Yeah.
but Air is just, he's got
Okay.
that
All
perfect mix of serious and funny at the same time. It's
right.
just,
I'll,
it's beautiful, Tom.
I'll put it on the list. I'm
You've
often
got
disappointed
homework.
by movies.
Air and Ted Lasso. I know Ted Lasso will be harder. 3 seasons. Air's what, 2 hours? Definitely worth
Yeah.
the investment in time. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll have an update on the NBA Finals. We'll see how that series is going. Plenty more good stuff to talk about sports. As always, a pleasure, Tom. We'll see you next week.